Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, March the 24th. Not the last Monday of March, but the first Monday of spring with our good friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Well, Bill, welcome as always. You know, I've heard so many stories about beautiful New York in the spring,
Yes.
and I'm sure it is. I'm sure they're true. So, how is the weather in New York?
Well, actually, it doesn't get really warm in New York until the middle of April or even into May. So it's reasonable weather. The highs are in the 50s, the 40s. It's been chilly for the last couple of days, uh, but what is interesting about it is that New York weather always has kind of an asterisk next to it because we can at a moment's notice get a hurricane, get a an enormous landstorm. We like we had last year. It can even snow in New York. There has been snow in New York in June. It's hard to believe it, but it has actually happened. So New York weather I would describe as changeable.
Right.
Yeah.
Changeable. That's right.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned that it doesn't get warm until later. So does that mean that when you were growing up that the Dodgers had a lot of afternoon games in April? Do you
Oh,
remember that?
I don't remember. They had a lot of afternoon games. It was only later when I was, an old man of about 10 that they began this characteristic that if it's televised, it's going to be at night because
Yeah.
that's where the money is.
No,
And
but I know that in New York because the Yankees, whenever we watch the Rangers playing in New York, or even when they rarely play with the Mets, Sunday and Saturday it's always afternoon games.
yes,
Uh, but during the week, it's night games for TV, of course. And I
yes.
was just wondering if it was that cold, if maybe because in some of the northern cities, like in Minneapolis and Milwaukee and
Oh, yeah.
Chicago and Detroit, even Cleveland, Toronto, well, Toronto has a roof, but Montreal before the roof. A lot of those places, they would do a lot of afternoon games in April just because the weather, they could drop to the high 30s. So playing ball was a little hard. But I was just curious when you mentioned that about the weather, whether some of the April games were in the afternoon just to make the stay away. Anyway, just a curiosity when you mentioned it, Bill.
Brooklyn Dodgers always had those beautiful Brooklyn Dodger satin jackets, and they wore them. They often wore them during the game. The
Yes,
reason for the weekend games uh, in the afternoon is that it allowed people who had regular jobs to come to the ballpark,
all right,
and it was very important to them. And
sure,
the top ticket for a box seat at Ebbets Field was about 325.
all right. Well, 325 bought a lot more back then
Oh, it sure did.
than it does today. I'll tell
It
you that
it
right
it
now.
it sure did.
Yeah, I tell you that right now because we went out to lunch yesterday and to one of the many nice places around here. And it used to be that for 3.99 you got a bowl of salsa and chips as part of the pre-meal. And this time around, my wife said, "Did you get two of them?" I said, "No, we just got one because they had gone up to like 6.29.
Yeah.
So that's a big increase for salsa and chips. It might be a blessing in disguise, so you don't need so many of them
Well,
in the
that's
future.
what is being said, but I have a feeling that those people who are devoted to good unhealthy food will find a way to get it,
Yes,
and and
it's
and
like
they'll
the smokers, like the smokers.
yes.
They kept increasing the price of cigarettes, and as far as I could tell, it didn't have any impact on people buying them. They kept spending. I mean, I was at one of the local stores one time, and this fellow came in and bought a box of cigarettes. The pack. I guess they call them. Where they were more than one pack in one. What do they call them?
Yes.
Whatever they call them, like 10 or 12 packs in and or cartons or whatever they're called. And I overhear that it's like over $45. So maybe
Yes, unbelievably expensive.
yes. And I'm sitting there saying, my gosh, how badly I mean, I just said to myself, that's a tank. I mean, tank of
Tank of
gasoline.
gas, right?
Yeah, amazing. Well, anyway, just wanted to do our usual weather report here at the beginning. The weather in North Texas is very nice today. I think it's in the 60s, 70s, but we don't have to worry about uh, the weather in the baseball season because we now have a stadium with a dome,
Oh, that's
and yeah, with a
great
roof,
idea. Great
as they
idea.
like to call it. And when it gets to 100 degrees in August, it makes a lot of sense, as they say. Well, I got to begin with something that we've talked about before. You've written about this many times before, and that's these JFK files that came out. And I don't know about you, but I always end up disappointed because I'm always expecting something that is going to tell me that it really wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald, that it was Lee Harvey Oswald and 6,000 other people who shot President Kennedy, Bill. And I always, and we kind of end up in the same place. Maybe not exactly the same place, but pretty close to it, Bill.
Well, that's absolutely true. They talk about the Warren Commission. It wasn't the Warren Commission that did the investigating. They were the names at the top of the list who were on the Warren Commission. But the actual work was done by very good researchers asking very good questions. And I'm always impressed when I go back and look at any of this material as to how thorough they really were. They did not rule things out, by the way. They never said in the Warren Commission report that there was no conspiracy. They said we could not find any conspiracy, but we could not rule it completely out. So if a lot of the people I think who make comments about the Warren Commission report have never read it, or have read an interpretation of it. I don't think that I don't think that anything important will come out unless there is somebody who is holding it back or whose family is holding it back because I don't want to get involved, and I can understand that.
Right.
It's not a particularly healthy area, but I've not seen anything since the Warren Commission report was issued that would change my view of what happened, and that view is essentially what the commission said, that Lee Harvey Oswald murdered President Kennedy. He fired 4 shots. He had a rifle that was matched later to it. He had a grudge against the government, had a grudge against the Marine Corps, seemed to have a lot of grudges, and that and that he also engaged in a lot of left wing politics. And there's nothing that has come out since that to make anyone go, "Oh my God, look at this."
Right. No, you're right. And that's I have to confess, when they talked about releasing all these files, I told somebody, don't get your hopes up because I don't expect anything. And here we go again. There really wasn't anything. Now there was I guess, some new information about the CIA, and maybe I don't know if the fact that he went to Mexico to the Russian embassy or the Cuban embassy. I think we knew that before.
Yes, we
I think
did.
we knew that before. But you mentioned Oswald and left wing politics. There was a gentleman here in the Dallas area. He's passed away. He was like sort of my dad's generation, who had left Cuba and for some reason was in New Orleans on his way to Dallas. And he had a personal confrontation with Lee Harvey Oswald
Huh.
because Lee Harvey Oswald was marching in favor of Castro.
Hmm.
And several Cubans there in New Orleans didn't think that was a smart thing to do. So they confronted him, and I guess they probably called each other names that we cannot repeat. But later, I guess when it was announced that he had killed President Kennedy, this man looked at the TV and said, "Hey, that's the guy that I was arguing with." So he had an inclination to the left, no question about it. And I remember one time reading something, I think it was at Power Line, when someone said it was a communist who killed him, because they've always been trying to tell us this story that that it was Lyndon Johnson who killed him so he could start, the Vietnam War
Mm,
or something like that. That was kind of the argument in the Oliver Stone movie, if you remember,
yes.
that, they wanted to start the Vietnam War and Kennedy was keeping them from starting it, that kind of thing. But, as it turned out, it was a communist who killed him, who just happened to be, unfortunately, for President Kennedy and for the country in the wrong place at the right time. And the guy was like perfectly situated. The car was in the perfect place. He took a shot. He was trained to shoot, I guess, and he killed him. I mean,
Yes.
that's been my conclusion for a long time, Bill.
Well, there have been a lot of questions. This so-called magic bullet theory that it was impossible to make the shot, and it later turned out that it was very possible. Uh, uh, and uh, the, the key point here is that you will hear these stories, and as you just pointed out, they've started to get resurrected that the CIA killed Kennedy. Well, the way I feel about stories like that is this: CIA is a name on a door. If you can show me people, name people who were involved, I'm interested. But the name of an agency is no evidence of any kind. And so far, I have not seen any people who have either come forward or been dragged forward who could be identified as somebody with the Kennedy assassination. Uh, the the Jack Ruby aspect of it. Jack Ruby, of course, is the man who killed Oswald, and of course, the theories were that Jack Ruby seemed to have some associations with a criminal element, and it is probable that this was may have been a gangland hit. No evidence there at all. Jack Ruby, it turned out, was a man who loved President Kennedy. He may have had some low aspects of his life, but that he was very emotional, and he wanted to get back at Oswald for killing his president.
And I remember, speaking of that, back in the early 90s, at the Rotary Club, one guest came to the Rotary Club, and he was the religious advisor or religious counselor of the people in the Dallas City jail. This is the guy who would go around and pray with
Yeah.
the prisoners who were either on death row or sick or whatever. There's a word for these people. I can't think of it right now. But anyway, so that was his job.
Yeah.
So he was there with Jack Ruby when Jack Ruby died of cancer, at the very end of his life. Ruby was dying of cancer. And he, in this presentation that I saw, said to Ruby, "Look, Jack, it's over. You're going to die any day. Just tell me what happened. Tell me the truth." And Ruby, to his last breath, said, "No, I killed him because I didn't want Jackie Kennedy to come to the trial," or
Mm.
something like that. And no, he did it, and like you say, out of loyalty to President Kennedy. They had killed his president, and he was angry. Now, there's always the controversy of how he got in the Dallas City jail. And from what I
Well,
understand,
he was very much accepted there. He was a
that's right.
local businessman. They knew him, and he knew them. He knew the guys who work in the jail, and he was very well known around Dallas. So Jack Ruby was a businessman. He had a bar or a restaurant of some kind, and there would be no reason to suspect him of anything.
Right. And the other person who always gets lost on what happened here in Dallas was the police officer who was killed.
Yes.
The one who that Lee Harvey Oswald did kill a police officer, and his name always gets lost a little bit over time. His widow died recently, by the way.
Yes.
I remember that. But anyway, nothing new out of the JFK, and maybe, like you said, Bill, somebody has a special note somewhere in a basement somewhere with instructions, release this when I'm dead. The problem is most of those people are dead by now.
Yes.
So maybe
Yes.
they lost the envelope.
They could have. I mean, you look, strange things often happen, and uh, uh, there probably are some things about the assassination that we don't know and will come out later in history, probably through DNA evidence or scientific evidence of some kind, but they may not change the story at all. Not everything that happens on the day of a murder is related to the murder.
Right.
There are things that happen on the days of murders that are absolutely unrelated, and yet because a guy may have been mentioned, oh, it must be him. It must be him. May not.
May not. And as I say, maybe there's an envelope somewhere in somebody's home, in somebody's closet with the instructions, as soon as I die, please break this story. Maybe there is such an envelope, Bill, but if there is, I hope whoever it is, it's got to be somebody pretty old by now.
Oh yes, very old.
Because if you were 30 years old that day, you're in your 90s now.
That's right.
And the chances of life expectancy are getting up there. So anyway, so that's the latest JFK. I don't know if there's going to be any more files released anytime soon. In a way, I'm kind of glad that President Trump released it, because I think hopefully this will put to rest all the speculation, and people can get back to more important things like our next topic, Bill.
Okay, I should tell you. I
Yeah.
I got out of the army
Yes.
the day that President Kennedy was assassinated, and learned about it as we were riding home. A guy had given me a lift into Penn Station in New York, and we heard the first reports of the grassy knoll.
Wow.
They said people said that the killer ran up the grassy knoll, and I said to my friend who was driving, well, if he was it really was the killer and he was running up the grassy knoll, they'll probably get him.
Yeah, that's true. And that grassy knoll, of course, is still there.
Still there.
If you come to Dallas, to where that museum is and the place, it's still there. I am fascinated. The one more thing I wanted to say about this, I am fascinated. If you go down to that spot, it seems like there are always tourists from other
Oh,
countries
oh,
there.
sure.
That spot and that whole conversation attracts people from everywhere, Bill. So JFK, the assassination, as you say, it's very controversial. It'll go on for a while. Well, let's talk about something current and very controversial, and that is what's happening with Tesla, these dealerships and people taking out I guess, their anger at Trump. I guess that's what it must be. Their anger at Trump by destroying Tesla, including the governor of Minnesota, who decided to take a shot at Tesla's stocks. And then when he got back home, they told him, "Hey, by the way, a lot of our teachers are investing in the
Yes, well,
Tesla."
the unions were heavily invested in Tesla.
That's right. That's right. And it would sort of make sense, because liberals are more liberal, or unions are more liberal, I should say. And until he decided to get together with Trump, Elon Musk was the darling of the liberals.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you're a liberal teachers union and they say, where should we invest our money? Well, should we invest it in, I don't know, let's say Exxon? No, that's fossil fuels. Tesla, well, of course, that's electric cars. Let's do that.
That's right. That's right.
But here's the thing, 18%, Bill. I don't know if I mentioned this, 18%. I saw this. Less than 20% of the stock is actually owned by Musk.
Yes.
The other
true.
82%, 80% is actually owned by, well, stockholders.
Stockholders, unions, pension funds, very important. That's absolutely correct. And so people are going after Tesla automobiles, destroying them, and getting away with it. Often getting away with it because they don't like Musk now. I mean, I'm surprised that they haven't gotten more of these people. And I think the reason may be is that they know where and when they want to strike. They may want to strike a Tesla dealer, and they often are disguised. They are wearing masks. By the way, people should know that masking is illegal in New York as a result of the Ku Klux Klan. they wore masks for the same reason these people are wearing masks, so they don't get caught. And but it is illegal in New York. These masks are also being worn by the people at Columbia. And I suspect that I think that part of the deal Columbia made with the government is that they will make masking illegal on campus.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. But I thought masking was really popular a few years ago. It was almost like they were all wearing a mask during the Trump speech. Remember, you had all
Yes.
these Democrats wearing a mask. I don't know what virus they were protecting themselves from. Maybe it was they thought they were going to get infected by Trump from the podium or something.
Yeah.
But
Well,
how crazy!
it should be noted that the 29th is the big day to look for because
Yes.
the left has promised huge demonstrations on the 29th and at Columbia particularly and throughout the country against the Trump administration. I would take that very seriously. You can be sure that many of the people who will be in those demonstrations have been either paid or are part of a group that we don't even know about or don't know about. But it could be a very, very, very difficult day because they are New York is going to be filled with cops. There are cops all over. They're going to be confronted by some of these people. Columbia University is very much on guard because they are afraid of another incident in which students might be prevented from going to school, and they know that this could get them into more trouble. So the 29th, a day to watch and a day to be apprehensive about.
Well, the 29th is let's see, the 31st is Monday, so it's Saturday, right?
Saturday, yes.
Saturday the 29th. Well, hopefully not, it doesn't spoil. I think one of the teams, the Yankees or the Mets, are opening that weekend. So I hope that it doesn't impact Yankee Stadium or Shea Stadium, or not Shea, it's City Field, I guess it's
City Field.
called now. But there is something, I guess, beyond the fact that they're destroying property. It is crazy what's happening to the left in this country. You know, when you had that beer company, remember the beer company, and they had that young
Yes.
man talking like whatever, Dylan, whatever the name was. You know, the way that the Republicans or the right reacted to that was, let's not buy the beer.
Yeah.
And you know, nobody was talking about blowing up, you know, breweries
No,
or blowing up stations. You know,
will boycott.
you blow up their bank accounts, I guess, by not giving them business.
Well,
But
yes, that in that situation, it was against the Bud Light or
I
uh,
think so, yeah.
and a lot of people didn't like Bud Light, and they boycotted it, and also that Budweiser, to its eternal disgrace, had become a woke company. So they not only did what they did, they also maintained their commitment to woke politics, and that did not make them any more popular among in the beer community. We'll use the term they like to use, the beer community, and but Budweiser later changed considerably. It's gotten rid of wokeness, but they're still identified to a degree with it. But to do what these people do, to burn cars where, and by the way, those cars, if the battery exploded, that
Mm.
is a very, very dangerous situation. Those are lithium batteries. If they explode, it could uh, tear up the not only the car but everything around the car.
Right.
You could have horrible human injuries. It's where we are as a nation today that uh, people are willing to accept behavior that not many years ago would be considered completely outrageous, and even some people on the left would regard it as outrageous. Outrageous today, we have come to accept as not, if not normal behavior, as permissible behavior, the worst kind of behavior. And I really am concerned about what it will do to the country ultimately.
Well, yes, and what it will do to, I mean, imagine People who may be driving a Tesla, to work or around the neighborhood or whatever, they now have to worry about some clown, attacking them or whatever. I mean, it's just it is so un-American that it makes you wonder, how did we get sick like this, Bill?
Well, I don't know, except that over the years, I think as a nation, our standards have declined. I know that behavior in America today is not what it was when I was growing up. That was many years ago. We expected something of people. Uh, Men opened doors for women, and tried to help women. If a woman was under attack, men would run toward that woman and try to save her from the attack that was expected of them. That is what was expected of a man. Today, the behavior of both men and women has become so foul that almost anything they do is something we just shrug at. And I
Right.
I don't know where this country will be in 10 years, but I know that standards in every area have gone down. And what was it? Was it Pat Moynihan who who invented the phrase "defining deviancy down," which meant that as policies become more deviant and behavior becomes more deviant, we begin to accept it.
Right. Well, the only consolation to all of this and the future is that polling data shows that young men are becoming more conservative,
I hope so.
and they're becoming more conservative. I think that may be the salvation, because I have to confess, a lot of the people that I see marching are young women,
Mhm.
and some of their behavior is just crazy. When I know that I'm making a big generalization there, but you go to these universities and it's usually a lot of women who are doing a lot of screaming, Bill.
Oh yes, yes, and this has been noticed. Now, whether it means that men even on the left have become more wimpy and afraid to get out there, or maybe they feel that if they do get out there and demonstrate the way the women do, they will get into more trouble because people assume if something goes wrong, it was the men's fault.
Yeah, whatever it is, but it is interesting. But I will say one thing: the 29th is going to be a great payday for people who make signs.
Oh yes. And
Just
they don't even have to make original signs, because if you actually look at left-wing demonstrations over the years, they keep using the same language.
that's right,
You know, what is the phrase like? Oh,
right.
hands
So
off this guy, hands off that guy. There's always somebody you want the hands off, and
right.
and that's not a phrase that most Americans actually use very often, but
No.
they used it. And another one was well, I can't remember now another one,
Well, there was
but
the one about LBJ. How many
oh
kids did you kill today? The
yes,
problem with
hey
that one,
hey, old
yeah,
LBJ,
yeah,
how
but the
many
problem
kids
with
did
that
you
is
kill?
that Trump doesn't rhyme with day.
Yes.
So,
th- Well,
so they're going to have to maybe JD Vance. They'll use something,
yeah, oh
uh,
yes,
or
but they
maybe they'll go after the lady who's the Secretary of Education. Or I'm expecting Pam Bondi to be a lot of placards about Pam Bondi that
oh,
day, the Attorney
absolutely.
General.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're gonna call her a fascist, no doubt
right.
about that. They're gonna call her a destroyer of young lives,
Yes.
and a woman who will deport innocent people simply to advance her own career. I mean, oh, they're gonna go after her big time, and
Well, and also Patel of the FBI.
the head of the FBI.
I'm sure
Uh,
they're going to be saying about him what they're saying about Musk. I mean, somebody was saying that Musk should go back to South Africa, which I find somewhat hilarious, because if you would
yes,
say anything like that about any other group, they would call you anti-immigrant.
that's right.
But somehow they can get away with it with Musk. But it's just absolutely crazy. It's insane, but it's the kind of hatred that is out there, and I guess in a way it helps Trump, because I was listening to an analysis at lunchtime today of this famous case that is before the appeals court today about this plane that was sent down to
Yes,
El Salvador. And this lady, the legal analyst, was saying that to a lot of Americans, and I think she may be right about this, a lot of Americans are sitting there saying, wait a minute, you're making it that difficult to deport a bunch of criminals, but you didn't do anything when they were being let into the country. To
that's
a
right.
lot of people
Exactly.
look at it exactly that way.
Oh,
That may not be the most legal way of looking at it
that's right.
technically, but impressions are easy to create, I should say.
Yes.
And for most Americans, those people being sent down there are not exactly the kind of people you want to have in your neighborhood.
Well, that's the point, and I think many Americans are a practical people, and they look at practical results. And you're exactly right. People are saying, first of all, how did this guy get into the country originally,
Right.
and why did we let him and millions of people in? He's not an American citizen, and he may have a green card, but a green card is a privilege. It's not a right,
Right.
and that a green card can be lifted very, very easily if he breaks the law or violates his immigration status. But that is the way Americans see it. Well, you know, how did he get into the country, and how did he get a gun? How did he get to people where he became an influential member of the political left, and yet we can't get him out of the country?
Right. Yeah, we have this entire, you know, such an entire mess to get somebody out of the country who shouldn't have been here in the first place.
That's right.
And it's not just one, it's a group of them. So, then they bring up they bring up the fact that, well, there is apparently one person in the plane who was not really a member of the group. And well, okay, so maybe they don't have a membership roster, Bill. Maybe
Yes, that's
maybe they
true.
don't have a group in Facebook that
That's true.
they talk in.
No,
But it's crazy.
practical people look at the practical situation, and they say, "Who is this judge who was more interested in keeping criminals in this country than he is in putting criminals in jail?"
Right.
And then they find out about him, and that he and his family have this whole background in the Democratic Party, and they say, how could a guy like this try to tell the Trump administration how to conduct its business?
Yeah, I mean it's just crazy, and then they all have the same profile, not just him. There was another famous case of a judge who all of a sudden became a military expert,
Yes,
and
yes,
this is another one of these judges. Um, Reyes, I think, is her last name, and now she's telling the Secretary of Defense and the President that I guess transgenders cannot be denied participation in the military or whatever. Well, the fact is that the military discriminates against a lot of people.
yes.
I mean, certain height you cannot be in the military, certain weight
Well,
you
that's
cannot
right.
be in the
They
military.
turn down an awful lot of people.
Yes. And if you're a certain weight, for example, you're not going to make it in special forces. I don't care how
Yes,
patriotic you are. So, I mean, they discriminate all the time, but the idea that this district, and that's what they are, the district judges,
district
they,
judges.
yeah, they all of a sudden they're experts in military operations, they're experts in law enforcement, and they're saying that these criminals were not given due process. Really? So they were not given due process. So they're now supposed to have a trial, and I guess the state will have to pay for a lawyer, so that they're represented by a lawyer in the federal court while we decide whether or not they're members of the group.
Yes, they could
Pretty
have been.
incredible.
They could have been member of another group just as bad, because the information hasn't really come out yet. But then you've got these characters who say this is a matter of free speech. I mean, they have a right to speak. Well, yeah, you can say pretty terrible things under the right to speak, but you don't have a right to speak in such a manner that you're advocating the murder of people.
Right.
And you
Or to
don't have
take over apartment complexes. That
yes,
you don't
they
have a right to do.
no, and as you said, the country seems to have gone batty. But I'm hoping that as these cases work their way up the system to the Supreme Court, we can get a little rationality.
Well, hopefully it doesn't even have to go there, because if it goes to an appeals court and the judge and these judges lose, then the Supreme Court can always deny the case, and that,
That's right. Yeah.
in a sense, stops it. But it is crazy, the idea that a district judge would all of a sudden become an expert on everything.
Oh, absolutely. And that district judge, who is an expert suddenly on the military, can do enormous damage.
That's right.
Enormous damage, because he rules that a military action is illegal, it may stop the action. It may also reveal classified information, and soldiers can die as a result of
That's
this.
right.
If an operation was being planned.
Right. No, that it's absolutely insane that this is going on, and the number of times they've done it to President Trump. I saw a number today on the screen during lunchtime: 64 times against President Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. Obviously, this is a premeditated campaign here to slow down
Oh yes,
President Trump, and no
there is
question about it.
there is a bill being proposed that will limit the authority of a district federal judge to the case on which he is working and to the geographic area that he is working in, so that he would not be that his judgments would not be valid all over the country as they are now.
Well, I
But
thought that's why they called him a district judge, Bill.
yes, but they have taken the position that we are federal judges, and our judgments should be applicable all over the United States. Well, I don't think that's what the founders had in mind. And there is, as I said, this legislation that is going to be proposed that will limit their authority.
Well, I sure hope so. I sure hope so, because it make a lot of sense. Well, let's talk a little bit about foreign policy, Bill. President Trump has been very active. They've bombed the Shooties or Houthis, whatever they're called, Houthis, whatever they're called. I'm always
No,
concerned
no one
about
can
saying.
pronounce it. Yes.
Well, I'm concerned that I'm going to say a bad word, when I pronounce their name, because here in Texas, there's a lot of bad words that rhyme with the name of that group.
Yes.
So that's why I'm worried about it. But President Trump seems to be hitting that. There's also all kinds of conversation about President Trump getting very serious, as they say, with Iran, potentially taking on Iran. That would be a major activity. He would have to go to Congress for that, I would think, Bill.
Well, I would imagine that on some of these things, he would have to go to Congress, depending on the origin of the issue. They say, for example, he cannot ban or he cannot destroy the uh, 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 Department of Education because it was created by Congress and only Congress can. So, well, that may be true. There may be some truth to that, but I suspect there are ways around it.
Well, you can
Apparently,
defund it, which is what they're trying to
well, yes,
do.
they can. Well, and if Congress funds it, you can not spend the money
Right. Yeah.
or spend it on something else. Look, if he wants to get rid of the Department of Education, there are many ways he can do it, and I think that he will have the public behind him. Uh, the we He is moving very quickly. Trump is. It's one of the assets of Trump, and that is he knows how to move quickly, and he now knows how to take actions that really smother the opposition immediately. But in time, the opposition starts to come back, and I think we're seeing that now. There are people in Congress who really want to take him on, and get rid of him through the legal system, which they've tried in New York and tried elsewhere, and it hasn't worked. But they think it might work, and they may get rid of him by getting him involved in a case that will last as long as his presidency.
Yeah, I mean they're trying a lot of different things, but I think their act is getting a little old. I think with
Oh,
people,
sure,
because I
sure.
think people are starting to see through it that, hey, this is not, this is a district judge. I mean, if the Supreme Court said to him, no, you cannot fly those people to El Salvador, that's a different story. But not that that's going to happen. But I mean, I think I understand the Supreme Court telling me or telling the president that this is not constitutional. That's a different story, but not a district judge. But if get back to Iran for a second, there's a lot of talk about the President Trump doing something about Iran. I guess eliminating their nuclear bases or whatever. That would have to go to Congress, very similar to the action with Iraq, wouldn't it?
Uh,
Or is he going to use the Afghanistan?
yes, he
Remember
can.
the original Afghanistan resolution going back to 9/11. That what got George Bush started in the Afghanistan war was that
That's right.
resolution. That
Yes.
has been used a million times.
Yes. Well, there are different ways in which a president can act internationally, and one of them is the Afghanistan resolution. Another is that he can declare a national emergency, and where he and another is to uh, act in such a manner that it cannot be challenged because of security reasons. There are national security provisions in American law where the president can take an action uh, and he will have 30 days in which to justify it. And would have to justify it because then the War Powers Act comes into being. Uh, it,
Although the War Powers Act, sorry to interrupt you, but the War Powers Act, whatever, it was never accepted. It started with Nixon. He never accepted it, but it was
yes,
never challenged either. No president ever took it to the court because it was never really applied to anybody. It was just something that they passed.
yes,
But there has never been actually a president who said, "No, I'm not. It doesn't apply to me. Now take me to court." It's
yes.
never happened that way. It's always been one of these things sitting on the shelf that nobody has ever used, Bill.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and because of the some of this legislation, though, it can sometimes be applied in ways for which it was not intended,
Right.
and that is a situation where you could have a president dragged out for all 4 years, claiming that he had violated the law knowingly and willingly, and that he used the United States military for illegal purposes, and what they tried to do in New York to basically destroy Trump through lawfare can be done on a national level as well. And that is something that is a matter of great concern because some of the same people who were involved in New York are working now in Washington. And they worked with the district attorney to try to get Trump, and they're back in action in Washington. So I think what the White House is really concerned about is he will get trapped into a situation that will last all 4 years of his presidency and basically become an inoperative president.
Right. That's a valid, very valid concern.
Yes.
I was going to say he should have the luck of Reagan. Remember, Reagan took out the Iranian Navy one time because they were shooting at boats in the Mediterranean, and he used the pretext that they were shooting at American ships, I guess, in the Mediterranean, and he responded by sinking the entire Iranian
Yes.
From one day to the other, there was no Iranian Navy anymore.
Yes.
They just took them out completely. So maybe that's what he needs to do.
Well, Reagan was the kind of man who knew how to speak to the American people,
Right.
and even if they thought he was wrong, they had a certain almost love for him. People
Right.
don't realize how much Reagan was loved because of the kind of man he was. I wrote an essay on this morning at Urgent Agenda that Reagan, the harshest Reagan could be was he would say to an opponent, "Well, there you go again," and that was about as tough as he sounded. He always sounded like a nice guy, even when he was taking out the opposition in very, very blunt ways.
Well, he took out President Carter in that debate.
Sure did.
With that line. I mean, that was the end of the people at the Carter campaign must have been saying, well, that's it. Start packing your bags.
Yeah.
Because it's over. I mean, that line was something else. Let me just bring up a quick point here. We got a few minutes, and that is what's happening with the Democrat Party. Rui Teixeira, who was the man who originally said that there was going to be an emerging majority of the Democrat Party. He wrote this like 20 years ago. Just about every week comes out with a new article pointing out how much trouble they're in.
Yes.
And one of the things that he mentioned this week, he brought up a few things. Number one, the image of the party is horrible. The fact that more and more people are leaving blue states because they're such bad at governing, and and stuff like that. That the image of the party is really bad, and young people too. That's another thing, especially young men
Mhm.
are more Republican than before.
That's
But
right.
it's really a party in trouble. And I know you mentioned,
Mhm.
I think before we came on, that it may not even be a party anymore in the traditional sense of the word, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're watching literally the end of the Democrat Party. Now, something will emerge, of course,
Yes.
but what could emerge is two parties, Bill, a more almost like in Canada, where you have a liberal party and then you have a green party or something like that that is
Yes.
more left. Something like that could emerge, Bill.
I think you're absolutely correct. Well, I've written that it doesn't have the characteristics of a political party anymore. I mean, if you wanted to talk to and deal with a leader in the Democratic Party, who would you actually choose? I mean, I don't think some of them even have phones. Or I mean, it does not have the characteristics of a true political party, and I believe that I'm amazed that so far nobody has come up with the idea of a center left party that could eventually replace the Democratic Party. Now, in the first years of a center left party, they could actually wreck whatever is left of the Democratic Party because there would be no chance of the Democratic Party actually winning. A center left party would take away enough votes to paralyze the vote getting ability of the regular traditional Democratic Party. I, I would not be shocked if somebody does that, comes in with a new party, a center left party, and will not win an election on the first try, but would bring in enough votes to put the Democrats completely out of business.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised because the party looks, almost more helpless and helpless all the time. And when you've got Bernie Sanders and AOC touring the country, if that's the face of the party, I'm glad, because
Yes,
that's not going to be a very effective opposition. I mean, they
that
may have people who follow them. I don't deny that.
oh, the image of the Democratic Party today is so bad that that the name Democratic Party is itself a reason why people vote against it.
Well,
Uh,
that's
uh,
exactly what Rui Teixeira was saying, that they have
yes,
an image
exactly.
problem.
Uh,
They have an
r-
image problem. And, people
uh,
say Democrat, and what do they think of? They
yes,
think of these wackos.
yes,
Uh,
well, it is not a party that appears, or an organization that appears to actually stand for anything that most Americans want. If you look at where they stand on the issues, they're now talking about these 80-20 issues where 80% of the public is against it and 20% is for it, and the 20% is always Democrats
right, right.
who are making their stand by wanting things that 80% of the country is against.
Right. And I think these flights to El Salvador are a good example of that, because most Americans look at those flights and say, I'm glad somebody's looking out for us.
Yeah,
And then you've got the
yes,
Democrats looking out for the people in the flights and talking about due process.
yes,
And
yes.
most Americans are looking at this and going, wait a minute, due process. What about the people they've hurt?
Well,
And
yes, and what about the this whole issue of men who suddenly become women, uh, invading women's sports and destroying women's sports? That's apparently now a 90-10
right,
issue
maybe
where
95,
90%.
more like
Yeah, yes.
99-1. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
it's like that's one issue. Bill, I just saw a headline, and we'll have to wrap it up, but I just saw a headline where in Portland, I think it was Portland, there was a guy who defeated a guy running as a girl who like broke all the records
yes,
in race and track and field, all the women's records.
yes,
And I'm saying, what a great honor that must be
yes,
for a man to call his grandmother and say, hey, grandma, I just beat all the girls' records.
yes,
And the grandmother is probably refusing to acknowledge him. Or
You're right. Yeah. You beat all the girls' records.
right, that's
Yes.
right. That's right. Yeah, so it's crazy. Well, Bill, as always, thank you so much for your time and thank you for your input. It's always wonderful. And we'll do it again next week. Here's
Oh,
one big change next week, Bill. It'll be the baseball season, actually. I bet you never had the baseball season starting at the end of March when you were in Brooklyn.
I I I if I did, I put it out of my mind because when the Dodgers left Brooklyn, all baseball ended.
Well, that's it. That's right. Well, I understand that. I know.
Yes.
But back then they actually started because I went back and checked it. And it just at random checked like about 10 or 15 teams. And back then they started usually like about the 10th or the 12th of April. And they did it because of the weather. They
Yes.
also had a shorter season. That was the other
Yes.
thing too. Well, Bill, thank you so much. And as always, thank you for your time. It's always a great honor to have you.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to do it, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
All right, Bill. We'll do it again the next time. As always, our good friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Lots of things we got into today, but that first segment on the JFK, I hope you share that with people because Bill made some really interesting points about the JFK assassination. You know, we're sort of running out of people who remember that. I mean, I remember it, but I was just a kid. They're different, but when you're like he was in his early 20s, you remember more. And we're kind of running out of people who remember that. And so it's nice to always hear the perspective of somebody who, as he said, found out about it on the radio when he was driving that day. Well, thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.